is still better than it was in Bastogne. I'm sure there's people in the room who would attest to that. I know at least one you'll be talking to us tonight. So welcome to the January edition, 2018. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for getting here. As usual, I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As usual, we have a few announcements. And one of which is we may have a little delay sometime tonight because, you know, if you were in the service, you know the expression snafu. We have a slight snafu with our projector. Charlie Lloyd went to get another one, and I expect we'll see him shortly. So, please follow my lead and turn off your cell phone, if you have one. And let me ask if anybody that doesn't know it needs hearing enhancers, if we have some. If you need hearing enhancers, we have some. Anybody need them? There's always one. Okay, I think I recognize some people I don't recognize, some first-timers tonight. With the first-timers, please raise your hand. Newcomers, thank you for coming. If you like what you see in here tonight, in the back, outside, you can fill out one of these with your name and email address or mailing address, and we'll be sending you a notice of future meetings. So please don't miss the opportunity to do that. You'll notice that some of our attendees are wearing name tags. Those of us who aren't in blue shirts are World War II veterans, just for the sake of the first timers. So would they please raise their hands? Good company. My name is Kirk Gibson. I'm the president of this little organization. We have several people generally wearing these shirts who help us, and we'll try to get through another year successfully like we did last year. We've gone for a couple of years now, I think, without a snow out or the weather delay I was worried about today, but I'm glad you all made it here. Some very important announcements, but the most important announcements, particularly for you who don't seem to remember it, is that we are sponsored by ourselves. We have a helmet committee at the door that will probably try to prevent your escape without offering us free will help. You'll recognize them by their distinctive headgear held in hand. So please don't be bashful. Say hello to them on the way out. Vietnam Roundtable, Richard Burton.
Okay, there is a Vietnam Roundtable. Normally we meet next Thursday, the second Thursday, but I'm forced to spend some of my kids' inheritance, so I'm taking off January and February, and we're going to start up again in March. I have the 2018 schedule out on the table in the back, and I was just thinking about this group yesterday. Do you know that we're coming up on our 15th anniversary? 15th, March 3rd?
March 2003.
Yeah. So back in March of 2003, this organization started as Bill Jackson, in his wisdom, with several others who were associated with the Hershey Civil War Roundtable, started this group when they found out a lot of them were more interested in World War II than they were with Civil War. So Bill started this almost 15 years ago tonight. So Bill, thank you very, very much.
And actually, Bill, you got to remember, you don't know, it started out in the Hershey Library, then went to the country meadows and whatnot, and we're just plain ran out of room because it's become so much fun. Yeah, it kept going, and can the forum be far in our future? I don't know. But last month we had upwards of 400 people here. I think the weather delayed a few this evening, but it's been terrific. Bill has an announcement. We'll just while we're talking about you, let you talk about your announcement.
Okay, well, back to the Civil War. Those of you who are local and are curious about our local Civil War veterans, on Monday, January 15th, 7 o'clock, the Homelstown Area Historical Society will have a presentation by Civil War historian Mike Espenshade, also a reactor with the 93rd out of Lebanon County, on the Civil War veterans buried in the Homelstown Cemetery. He has located 156 Civil War veterans in that cemetery. As much as possible to date, and I'm talking about 700 hours of research Mike has put in on this project. He's produced a book that's about 4 inches thick, and he's found out what units they were in, what battles they were in. Anyway, it's going to be a great presentation. It'll be held at the Homelstown Area Historical Society's museum. It's called the Parish House, behind the Lutheran Church on North Rosanna Street in Homelstown. Everybody's welcome, and we do have refreshments. Got it?
What time?
7 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
While we're on the subject of the Civil War,
the Hershey Civil Roundtable is going to meet the third Thursday, which is January the 18th, and the topics are going to be the Underground Railroad by Cooper Winger. I don't know if anybody heard from him, but he's finally a sophomore at Dickinson, and I think he's in the process now working on his 6th book. And his books are extraordinarily well done and documented. And so that, again, we meet on 7:30 at Country Meadows in Hershey. And also in the back we have our trip that's going to be the 21st of April. It's going to be Lee's Retreat, and everybody's welcome, like the same as the meeting. You do not have to be a member to come on our tours or come to any of our meetings. And if you'd like to be put on the mailing list, please just see me. I'll put you on the mailing list. And what we do, the same thing is, your emails do not go out to anybody else. We keep them in-house. So if anybody's interested, contact me for the email, or in the back we have the flyers. Thank you.
There's also a Harrisburg Civil War Roundtable meeting in January. It's on Friday, the 26th of January. Our speaker is Michael Jesperger, who will be talking on the Hunley, the Confederate submarine in Charleston that was brought back up recently. He's written extensively on that subject. Our meetings take place at the Radisson Hotel in Camp Hill. If you're coming just for the talk, show up by 7:45 on Friday the 26th. Also wanted to mention that this weekend begins the 11-week-long winter lecture series at the Gettysburg National Battlefield at the Visitors Center down there. They take place from 1:30 to 2:30 every Saturday and Sunday between now and the 10th of March, starting this Saturday. And if you're thinking of going on the Lee's Retreat from Gettysburg field trip later this year, there's an excellent talk this Saturday by Mark Atkinson on the subject of Lee's retreat from trying to reconstitute the Army of Northern Virginia after the Battle of Gettysburg. It's a nice tie-in with the subject of our upcoming field trip. If you can't make the trip to Gettysburg, they stream these lectures live on Facebook. And so if you don't want to drive back and forth to Gettysburg 22 times, you can watch these lectures in the privacy of your own home from 1:30 to 2:30 by looking at the Gettysburg National Military Park's Facebook page, and watch them in the comfort of your own home. A little less hazardous than hazard in these roads. Thanks.
and one more Gettysburg. It has been proposed by our board, and I guess I didn't realize this other trips were being held, but in May, on May 19th, is it? Yeah, weekend, we're going to try to put together a busload of people to go down to Gettysburg and have a personal tour at the Eisenhower Farm and
will be like the different areas like the POW camps and it might or might not include the Eisenhower Farm, but many things that were in Gettysburg people I know about, like a not making facility for the invasion of Japan was never occurred, was there in Gettysburg. Eisenhower trained the resident man in tank corps. There were some POW camps there for German prisoners in Gettysburg and some other sites that we've seen. Maybe the Eisenhower Farm that would be kind of maybe an add-on type of thing, I'm not sure yet.
But a lot of things about Gettysburg that don't necessarily pertain to the famous Battle of Gettysburg, which are of great historical interest as well. So I'd like to ask just right now, if there's a show of hands, but we haven't really put this together, but we'd like to know how many people think they might be interested in going. We're going to have a bus. It's obviously going to cost a few bucks, but we don't know how much. But it seems to me that there's enough people, Chris, that would be interested. So, Chris, one of our board members, will be working on that, and you'll hear more about it in future months. Thank you. All right, getting a little bit more modern from the Civil War. If you don't know it, and on February 1 through 3 is the Battle of the Bulge Living History Week over at 48 in Town Gap, where they have a reenactment, all kinds of things going on. There are flyers in the back if you're interested in going. You can also look it up on their website, which is being cranked up to be current, but hosted by the World War II Historical Association, I think it's called, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal over here, so if you're of interest, stop on out. Open to the public. Okay. Okay, let's go back a few years. It might be a little germane to this evening's conversation. Revisit 1944. It's hard to ignore this time of year because of the weather. And obviously, in the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes Forest, Belgium and Luxembourg, it's been raging. The battle has been raging since December 16th, and will go till January 25th, when the Germans finally run out of fuel for their tanks and have to withdraw. Some 80,000 GIs were killed, captured, or wounded, more than any battle in U.S. history. So, hats off to anybody and everybody who participated, particularly those who survived those horrible conditions. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that tonight. And of course, if that wasn't enough, on January 22nd, 1944, American and British troops swarmed ashore at Anzio, roughly 30 miles north of Rome. The brainchild of Winston Churchill, dubbed Operation Shingle. The attack caught German troops stationed along the Italian coast largely by surprise, but after an initial onslaught, the Germans dug in, and the next several months saw some of the fiercest, most prolonged fighting in World War II's European theater. As the Allies, including the Canadians and French, alongside the British and Americans, battled German troops controlled the region at cost of several thousand more lives. So, needless to say, January was a tough month, January 1944. All right, getting closer to here. Charlie, are you here? Okay. The next meeting we have is February 1. Thursday, February 1st, so be sure to bring a friend and come to the meeting. I'm not sure, but I think the church dinner may resume that evening. I heard a yes. All right, on the postcard and email, we'll have the number to call, Bev Barb, to let them know so we can get a head count so they can be prepared for us. How are we cooking here, folks? Do we have a 14-year-old in the house? I know if I talk these things. Tonight we have a very exciting show. We have Steve Hunter, author of the book Out Back, who will tell you all about our speaker tonight, because after all, he wrote the book. He's also a very talented musician and writer and performer, so he'll be the one that will run the show. Steve, you want to come up and introduce Charlie to us all? And
I believe so. Yep, I'm on. There you go.
Hello, everyone. So, woke up this morning and I looked outside and I said, Lord, we have a busy night tonight and a long drive between Hummelstown and Williamsport. Can you bless this day for us? Didn't you though? How about we give our thanks to the Lord right now for that? I also woke up this morning. Today is 1 year ago that my father joined the Lord. He passed away, and I said this morning in my prayers, Dad, I'm going to do something today that's important, and I'm going to dedicate it to you. So I do that also as I sit here with this great man and be able to share these stories and help to tell you some amazing tales. I prepared something first that I'd like to read, because I know that I am also surrounded by other veterans in this room. Today I stand here in the awe of heroes, true heroes. Today we live in a world where society has glamorized bad behavior, sinful lifestyles, reality TV, spoiled rotten sports figures, and other types of unimportant values as their measurement for heroes. Many people lack integrity themselves and look at these attributes of these false gods and so-called heroes with blank stares, much like that of a zombie, not knowing what the meaning of a hero truly is. Disappointment is not a strong enough word of what I feel for this type of behavior. A hero is a person that either places themselves into a dangerous position or responds to a situation that he or she has been flung into without selfishness. A hero understands that what they did and how they did it is not done for a medal. It is done because of their integrity that they hold true within themselves as human beings. The men and women that we have lost on the battlefield showed all of us what the true face of a hero looks like, and today and every day we should remember them in the presence of soldiers and appreciative American citizens. But as Americans, we should be focused on remembering these heroes each and every day that we enjoy with what this great country has to offer all of us. We can fix this trend. Be a strong voice that explains to your children and your grandchildren and all of their friends what is really important. That is life. Take the time to watch movies with them, documentaries, together with them about the wars that we fought, and teach them that this part of military history is important to preserve, and explain the lessons within. And then, when they need a bigger jolt, pry them away from the video game controller, take away their cell phones, shut down their computer, and bring them to a meeting in a place like this. This will remind them of the sacrifice that total strangers made for them without ever asking for a thank you. Today, myself and I know all of you, we all say thank you to our fallen soldiers and to those who have served, those who are still with us, and those who are serving today. We remember all of those sacrifices that are still being made as we honor true heroes. God bless them all, huh? I'm proud to announce a man that has shared those stories with me over the past 5-year period while I wrote 2 books to honor him and the soldiers that he fought with in World War II. From the command cars, a tribute to the men of the 628th Tank Destroyer Battalion that were attached to General George S. Patton. This driver thrust himself into harm's way in the many battles of the European theater of operations, driving officers into those battles. He flushed out German soldiers hiding in hedgerows. He took German prisoners. He helped to rescue American GIs and helped his fellow soldiers cope with the horrors of war and what they were witnessing. His follow-up book, Sergeant Libby, 100 Years of Stories, encompasses more enthralling history from the battlefields, the service that he gave in the CCC camps prior to World War II, and what helped a 100-year-old tech sergeant get through all of those situations. I had written a book called Training Heroes. Training Heroes is the prequel to a book and a movie that you may be familiar with, which is The Lone Survivor. Since 1985, I've been a professional martial arts instructor, and for 20 years, I gave the training to Marcus Luttrell and his brother Morgan, the lone survivor and his twin, Navy SEALs. I wrote the prequel. His family knew me, and they said, "My dad has a lot of great stories." How often do you hear that? Well, I'll come and sit and listen to him. So I prepared a few questions. I sat down with Sergeant Libby, and I said, "Well, tell me about this." And before I got to question 2, I had the answers to 20 questions. And I said, "Stop there." I said, "I'll be back tomorrow with a video camera because we have a lot to talk about." 3 years later, we released the first book, and then we went on our little book tour and started speaking to people and telling stories. And then I finally said to him, "How come all these additional stories that I'm hearing you held from me?" He said, "I don't know. The more I talk, the more they just come into my mind." That's when I decided to write the follow-up. Do we have pictures yet, or are we still figuring that one out? That's okay. Stretch. This is the sign. He grew up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Irish descent. Very athletic. Could swim across the Susquehanna River in one stint. Helped to save lives on the river in the current. Stories were told to me by family members that he would jump off the top of a 60-foot bridge, swan diving, doing the Tarzan yell. I've been trying to get him to do that for me in Williamsport. He won't do it anymore. The swan dive, yelling Tarzan yell.
Well, I got a little older.
In Benton, Pennsylvania, he went into Camp Morton, CCC camp. Wonderful stories in his book about that. We're going to tell you a couple from there right now. And then to the National Guard, and then ultimately into a tank unit, shipping over and driving the M20 command car in the European Theater of Operations. On October 3rd of 2017, Sergeant Charles Libby turned 100 years old. Boy, did we have a party. Have you ever had to plan a party for somebody 100 years old? It's not an easy task because you want to do it right. So, at the end of the party, he was in pictures flanked by representatives and senators and all kinds of VIPs and so forth. And he still stood there wondering, why me? Why me? That is a true hero. He doesn't ask for credit. He does this because he enjoys meeting people. He can tell a great story. And he's very proud of what he did and the men that he served with. So, I'm going to get him to stand up, and we're going to start our little presentation of stories. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sergeant Charles Libby. crack in the bottle,
Well,
so I didn't slip a flask in here.
I don't want nothing strong.
Okay, nothing stronger than water. There we go. Before he starts talking, one thing I want to mention that yesterday he drove himself to the Moose Club and danced with 6 or 7 different ladies. In his follow book, you'll see a picture of him up on the exercise machine, doing that 3 times a day. Was out the other day shoveling snow. So this is the water. I'm bottling it from his house, and I'm selling it by the case. My wife will be taking orders out there.
These are my notes, you can't have those. You gotta stay over here.
There you go. Just don't walk off the stage. You can sashay if you like. Well, the one that we're going to start with right now is that the CCC camps were a very important part of American history. And I have to be honest, I'm 52. And I loved history class in school. Loved it. When I started talking to him in his interviews, and he was talking about, when I was in the CC camps, I was embarrassed because I thought, what did you do time for? I didn't understand. Then I thought, were you a prisoner of war? I didn't know what they were. They did not teach it in my school. And I was disappointed after I did my homework. What a rich part of our history. Fantastic. And it helped to lead people into the military because you had that military presence within those camps. Camp Morton, Benton, Pennsylvania. His introduction was the dynamite crew. Tell them a little bit about your job, what you had to do when you were on the dynamiting crew.
Well, when I first started with the foreman, I worked on the dynamite crew, and we blowed stumps. We also blowed rocks. Now, we had what they call, some of you gentlemen might know what a star drill is. Well, we had a star drill, and 2 worked together. They would take this here, and with an 8-pound sledgehammer, and they'd hit that, and after they got the feel of how using the sledgehammer, you used to come up and go like that, because you knew how to handle it. And very seldom any boy would get hurt by being hit in the wrist. And what we do, as you drill, he'd do 3 plunges around, then we'd wait till somebody blew it out, and that was us. You have to blow the dust out to go ahead. So when they dusted out, you start all over again until you get about that far down in the rock. And then we take the drills out and put the dynamite in. And you have to be very careful with the dynamite because the stuff it's made out of, sometimes it would settle at the bottom. And you had to be very careful how you drop that down in there. Because after you leave go of it, it's going down maybe another foot or foot and a half. And we never had anything happen that way because we got so we knew how to handle that kind of a job. Then there was a foreman, I forgot the foreman's name.
Lou Dutter.
Lou Dutter. He was one of the nicest gentlemen I've worked with. And he was also on the drill team too, because he was the foreman, and we always followed what he ordered. And we all did well. We also blow stumps. We drive a bar, and you drive that bar down as far as you can drive it until you probably hit a rock. And then they pull that crowbar light out, and then when you pack it in nice and slow with the dynamite and make sure that it went all the way down. Then you had to take your plunger and poke down there to make sure it was solid. So it always come to you knew what was right. And after that, then Lou Dutter would fill in holes with dynamite, sticks about like that, about that big around. And he shoved them down in there till it felt pretty solid. And he didn't poke around no more. So what we did is after we got it drilled away one, and he packed all the dynamite in, then usually if you get a handful of mud, you would mix it up a little bit and throw it down there only till about there. And then you put a fuse, the fuse was already on it. Then you light the fuse and you would be maybe about from here to over there. And you had to be sure that the dynamite went off. And usually that's what happened, the dynamite went off. And they hollered, fire in the hole. And that means you better get paying attention what's happening. Or get behind a tree or something.
That was a good save since we're in a church. Did you see how he retreated on that? You all got it though, right? Very good. So he was on the dynamite crew, and the officers noticed his attention to detail and his hard work and so forth. And one day they asked him, "Would you like to be an orderly?" So he took the job as an orderly, and he would take care of the officers and so forth. And he did that. He was in the CCC camp. He enjoyed the way of life. He enjoyed that presence of the military, the skills that they were teaching him and so forth. And the 1936 flood came through Williamsport, and his house was filled with mud and debris and so forth afterwards. And his father requested that he was able to withdraw from the CCC camp because he needed his son there to help their family to get their home back the way that it was before. And so he was given an honorable discharge from the CCC camps. When Captain Jack Thompson, the man who was in charge of the camp, got the request, he said, "I will certainly let Charles go." He says, "But I really hate to lose him because he's a fine young man and he's done a fine job here." So he had to go back and do that. So then he took a couple of odd jobs and so forth. He knew about the military through his Uncle Lyman, which was in World War I. But Mr. Libby wanted to be able to choose the branch he was in so that he wouldn't get drafted. And he chose the 109th Infantry out of Williamsport and was quickly sent off to Fort Indiantown Gap.
No. We went to Maryland. Remember Maryland?
You did after, but you had to go to the Gap first. You had to meet there.
Yeah.
You went to Maryland.
You're right.
So I hope I know him better than him.
He's right about
So
that.
when I told him that when he passes away and he joins the Lord someday, I'm going to do the one-act play. I'll have to cut my hair though. But speaking of hair and look and everything, did you see the picture on his book? Do you know who he looks like when he was 22 years old? On the front cover of that, did you see? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Errol Flynn. Right here. There he is, Mr. Errol Flynn. Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Now, what do you think? Look at this. Look at the uniform.
Yeah.
Huh? How many of you soldiers still fit in your uniforms? There's a couple? Hey, I like it. Awesome. Good. Al Lentz was a man who was there and called Mr. Libby up at one time in front of all of the other recruits that were there. And it kind of embarrassed him, but it also set him on a path for the rest of his life and how he conducted himself and also how he presented himself and looked to people. Tell him about what Al Lentz said to all the other soldiers as he called you up.
Well, when I was in the 109th Infantry, he was always spick and span. Really, especially in the parades, he was always dressed as a real good captain. And one day he we was in the armory up there in Williamsport, the old building. I guess the building's still there, but it's used for something else. And when we was drilling that time, in particularly, Alice was on the balcony, and he says, "Now I want you soldiers to look at this boy here." Well, first he said, "Charles Libby, front and center." So I walked up, and made the turns that you make, and I stood there, and Alice said to the sergeants and the corporals and so on, he said, "I want you to look at this boy." He says, "He looks like West Pointer." is I would appreciate it if some of you GIs and sergeants and whatever, he'd start to look like this way. He looks like a gentleman also. And the guys were talking about among each other. So when we got down in the town gap, the guys started to call me the model soldier. And that went on for quite a while. So there was one guy there that didn't care too much for me, and he's the one that got me into the National Guard. And we was on a problem, my problem, and one of the fellows to me said, "Hey Charlie," he said, "if you want to get out of the infantry, why don't you go down there and sign up on the 10th Study?" He says, "They're going to hire, take on guys to train them to be in the anti-tank." So I run into Irvin Kirschbaum. He says, "Charlie," he says, "why don't you get on that place, officers' quarters, and find out if you can sign up?" So he says, "You can only sign up on Sunday." So I went down there, and on Sunday I went in where the headquarters was, and I said, "They tell me you're hiring GIs to make an anti-tank outfit with them." And I said, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, we're making an anti-tank outfit." He said, "You want to join?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I want to join." He said, "You got any friends want to join?" I said, "I got about 7 of them." So I put my name down, and they said, "Well, what about these other guys?" I said, "Put your name down, too." So I got these 7 other guys to join the National Guard. Guy in particular was going to get married the day we were appointed to report down to 10th City, and he was about ready to punch me in the mouth. But over the whole thing, we were on another map problem, and Sergeant Getson says, "Libby, is you and Phillips and Ed and so on, fellas, go in and get your belly together and take it down to the supply house and report down to 10th City." And of course we all knew where 10th City was. That's where you sign up. And after we get down to Irvin Kirschbaum, he was going to get married that Saturday. And his marriage didn't dare to come up because he was going down there. When they order you to report to some place, you don't argue. You better report down there. So all 7 or 8 or 10 of us, I don't know, we all poured it down. And the one, this Lee Marvin, he was the guy who was going to get married. He was about ready to punch me in the mouth. But sure, a couple of years later, he says, "Charlie," he said, "I'm glad you got me in there." He ended up to be a line sergeant. And of course, he says, "I felt like busting you in the mouth for spoiling my opportunity to get danced." I said, "Well," I said, "sometimes them things happen." I said, "You're in a good outfit, stay with us." He said, "You bet your life I will." So
And the best part of it is that the marriage didn't work out. He traveled around to the different cities in the United States on what they refer to as the U.S. maneuvers. In each state, of course, they had specialties that were taught to the soldiers to be prepared for what they would encounter when they got to Europe. Being that he had a driver's license, he was told that, okay, you're going to be a driver. So the specialties that he was taught involved mainly the operation of his vehicle, the necessary repairs or being able to identify that something's wrong with it, how to properly drive that and other vehicles if necessary, and also how to read maps. Now think about this. One of the things that he told me in the interviews, I'd say, "Well, how did you had to learn how to read these maps and this and that?" He goes, "Sometimes you'd be driving down the road," he says, the signs were changing around. And there was all kinds of things that they did to try to throw them off, which is smart. But they learned how to read these maps so well from the topography and so forth that he was able to drive and to do what he had to do. All the different states and so forth that they went to. Then they took him to Camp Shanks, New York. Something different happened when they went to Camp Shanks, New York, and that was that the entire unit was quarantined. At that moment, the soldiers knew something was up. What's going on? So, once they told them, they loaded onto a ship called the Aquitania, correct? The Aquitania?
Yeah.
They loaded on there,
Yeah.
and they launched, and that was the beginning of his journey to ship over to Europe. So tell them a little bit about, once you got into the open water, what it was like for the soldiers.
Well, when we got into the open water, we was 9 days on that water because the Germans had submarines, and they was following us. And there was a bow and a stern, and the stern's the rear end. And you could see what the machinery down underneath that boat would make it. And it was just like a rattlesnake. It just went that way. And we were doing the same thing, trying to stay away from it. But the Germans finally gave up because they couldn't get a bead on us. So we ended up in Glasgow, Scotland. And when we was there, we were standing there for 4 hours in the rain, waiting for them to take us down to a British camp. They had already moved the British somewhere else. I don't remember where they moved them. But anyway, we moved into their quarters. And one of the guys asked these Scots people, says, how do you people really like the king and queen? And I don't want to tell you what to say. Because they like them they pay like taxes. They pay so much to keep your king and queen. And of course that was one of them. And then finally a boat came, or a train came, and we rode the train, and then we got on a boat or a truck and went to this camp. And that's where we stayed till we went overseas.
So when he got to this particular camp, one of the things that was his first introduction to understanding that he wasn't just over in another country, he was in a war, was the presence of what they call barrage balloons, which looked like mini blimps that hung around the city and so forth. And then they began the air drills for the bombings that were coming from the German planes. I like to listen to him talk about when the Brits got a spotlight on one of the enemy planes.
When they got a bead on a German plane, just one camera, or one
Light.
what were they? I forget. Spotlight. When they get one spotlight will get onto them, that their plane was dead because 4 or 5 more planes got onto that German bomber, and he came down, but he was halfway below the edge. And
So they were there for a little while, and they had, because they're a tank unit, they had to wait for their launch at Omaha Beach until 3 days after the initial invasion, so they could secure the beachhead for the tanks. Mr. Libby was on an LST in his M20 command car, and off of that LST, he was the first vehicle to come off. Now, this is 3 days after, but it was still a hot beach. So tell them what you saw as you come, well actually, tell them about your vehicle as you were getting off the LST and getting started into the water.
well, the LST, it opened up just like a fan. It just opened up like that. And I was a lead vehicle because the captain had me as his driver, and there were very few guys that already had made a driver's license. And I already had mine. And when I come off of that boat, there was 3 or 4 tanks in back of me. It would come off when I come off. And you better come off right, because if you don't, you're going to drown. So as I come off of the ramp and hit the water, right away, and I didn't feel bottom. And I thought, my God, what am I going to do now? So I revved up in my motor, and I could feel it grabbing a hold and leaving go, grabbing a hold again and leaving go. I thought, well, this son of a gun is going to get it right. Like, right up to the bank. And as I was going on down, I watched the boys getting mowed off. One time when I looked and seen right there, it just made me feel that more I'd like to get a hold of them. And one time I did. So tell
No, wait, let's go in order. That's what happened when I started interviewing him. I was like, oh no. So on the beach, one of the things that he talks about, and it's in the book as well, was the bloody water, the body parts. There were pillboxes that obviously had been taken care of before they got there, but they were still, there were different soldiers trying to get up on the different parts and so forth, and he saw some of them get picked off, and so there was still fighting going on at the time when he got there. But he got up the beach. They had an objective. This unit was to get up to the road, make a turn, and they were supposed to go to take a town. So they got up on the road, and they weren't on there very long, and they heard the frantic screams of a woman. So they stopped. Tell them about what you saw.
Well, he didn't bring up, there was a bunker here and a bunker here, and we drove up in between them.
Okay.
And as we got closer to the road, and then we leveled out. And that lady, she was screaming her head off. Well, finally we got up to where the woman was, and Dida, he wanted to be a hot shot. He got out and walked over. A lot of us carried nippers with us because of booby traps and tripwires and stuff like that. And we seen him reach for his cutters, and we said, "Don't do it, Dwayne. Don't do it." He kept on going, and when he got up there, he snipped that wire off. Guess what happened? The instrument they had has got cattywampus up in the door jamb, and the guy reached up there real slow, pulled it out, and threw it way out in the field. And if that one went off, it would have been just flesh from both of them.
Now there is your word for the day. When's the last time you used cattywampus? That is a $3 word.
Another word.
They continue.
Cattywampus.
They know what it is. I just like to tease you. My teenage daughters, every time they hear him tell that story, they say, cattywampus. So they moved down the road. Understand, they just got off the LST. They're there a matter of minutes, and they get their first taste of the mindset of what the Germans were doing. Setting booby traps for us, either drawn in by the screams of this woman, or, just a way to say, we're still here. Who knows? But they took care of that. They go down the road a little ways, and again, they were supposed to meet their objective, was to go down the road and take a town. And they start passing British soldiers that were supposed to have already been in the town ahead of them, but they were sitting down off the side of the road in like a ditch or a small foxhole, and they were sitting down in there. And Mr. Libby's vehicle pulled up beside him and began to address the British.
Well, when we pulled up beside him, the chief officer of the British bunch, they were in a ditch there. And the ditch was pretty long. And we said, we heard that you guys were taking that little town up ahead there. What the heck are you doing here? They said, boys from Williamsport said, we have to have our tea 10, 2, and 4. And we said, never mind, we'll take care of it for you. So we took care of it for them. And we just shook our heads and went on.
So before they even got there, they passed what looked to be like a pub. And the 47th was with them. And they decided to stop to see what might be inside of this pub. So they stopped the motion, and some of the guys from the 47th went in, opened up the door and went into this pub, and tell them what they found in there.
Well, when we walked in there, there was 4 or 5 German officers having a great time, drinking whatever they were drinking. And they thought that they thought our tanks, when our tanks were going by, they thought they were their tanks. But we didn't sound the same. Anyway, they began to get the wind of it, and they started to get up and die out again. He pulled the gun, threw a bullet up into the chamber, and he was going to shoot a couple of them while they were standing there. And one of our officers said, "Don't shoot them. They're high officers. We might get some information off of them." So they took them prisoner, and we didn't see them after that.
Once again, this is just moments after they've arrived that they came into all of this. Briefly, I'd love to hear you go through the whole menu. Tell them basically all the battles that you were in. You listed them for them.
Well, I was in Seas, Metz, St. Louis, St. Nazaire, the Battle of Valls, Battle of Bastogne, the Battle of Hercule Forest, plus Luxembourg, Waldendorf, and what was the last? Aachen, Germany. And
everything in between.
yeah, we had to have some scrimmage sometimes. But we finally put them out of misery or send them back.
The Hercule Forest, when I started listening to the stories of the Hercule Forest and then doing research, I realized just how brutal that part of the war was. And he would refer to the different things that would happen where planes would come down and crash into the top of the trees, and just that the Germans were embedded within the woods of this forest and so forth. But being that he was a driver, at night, when it was time to be on guard duty, he was first. And so tell them about the slow-flying plane.
I'll tell them about Bed Check Charlie. When I was, usually all the drivers who was driving any weapon of any kind, they would be first on guard. And I can't understand how them Germans could keep that plane moving so slow all around. And they just begging for you to take a shot at it. But we didn't do it because orders come down, don't shoot at Bed Check Charlie. So I looked up and, my golly, I could see that guy's numbers. And I was, shouldn't do it. You're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble if you do shoot. So I backed off of him. I didn't shoot. Because if I would have shot, they would have laid their artillery heavy in us, probably killed a lot of people, and ruined the positions that we already fought for.
He said they fly so slowly you can just read the numbers on the plane. You could probably have a conversation with the guy. And recently we were in a parade and the two of us got to ride in an M20 command car that is totally restored. It looks like it just came off of the line. Two gentlemen from New York own it and brought it down. And they're going to bring it down again for the Veterans Parade in Lewisburg this next 4th of July. And we're going to ride in it again. But
that's just when we're still around.
I know. I've already started planning your 105th birthday party. Don't even. It's going to be big.
I'll be
there. You'll be there.
I hope. You never can tell.
So the next thing is a story that kind of touches the heartstrings for some of the things that happened to our soldiers. They were pulled off, and they were waiting orders and so forth. And there was some guys that came up from behind in a tank who were filled with, he would say, a bodily fluid and vinegar. So you fill in the P word. And they wanted to know where the Germans were. Where are the Germans at? Where are the Germans at? So tell them about that when you were sitting with the captain and you told those soldiers up ahead but to watch the hedgerow because there were some soldiers spotted there.
Oh, yeah. Well, to make the story short, my vehicle was acting up.
No, wrong story. The guys with the tank and the bazooka.
Oh, my. The guys that, we was on a level where tapered all the way up. And our tank was in a battle up there. A real hard battle. We had the M36. That was the best tank in the Second World War. And the Sherman tank only had a 75, and we had the M30. Well, that penetrated, and when it got inside, it exploded inside. The Germans didn't like that too well. Well, anyways, where do I go from here?
Well, these guys came up from behind it, and they asked, where are the Germans? So the commanding officer said that there's a battle going on up ahead. But there is some Germans that were spotted in a hedgerow up ahead. Make sure that you spray that hedgerow and take care of them. Don't forget that you're going to encounter some guys up to ahead to the left.
Well, when they got up there, they was full of vinegar, if you know what I mean. And they was having a good time. And they said, where in the H is the crouch at? We said, you can't miss it, just keep going on. You hear the battle going on, just keep going on up there. You're going into them. But we said, watch the hedgerow up there where that farmhouse is, because there's Germans in there with a bazooka. And they said, yeah, we'll take care of that. But they got going up there and they started acting a fool, joking, kidding about different things. And the Germans put a bazooka shell through the terror. And Captain Jones and I and some of the boys, we heard it hit. We heard the tank got hit. So Captain Jones said, let me get your vehicle. We're going up after them babies. So when we got up there,
Wait a minute, the tank came back first. Tell them the tank came back first. The tank came back and you had to get in the tank. The tank came back.
Oh,
The
yeah.
tank came back.
The tank come back, but we had to take the two men, the lieutenant and the sergeant, out. So the 47 Armored Infantry, they worked with us, and they got up on the vehicle and helped us take them out. But I took a hold of the lieutenant, and one of the 47 Armored Infantry guys helped me pull him out. But while I was pulling him out, I had to slide his head over where his face was and lift him out. And then Captain Jones says, Libby, get in your vehicle. We're going up and get them H's. So when I got up there, I didn't drive alongside the road. I drove right into the hedgerow. And I scared out 4 Germans. And we got them down off of the road a little bit. And I had to stay in my vehicle because we didn't ever know when the plane might come over. So as I was backing up, Captain Jones says, here to me, and he threw me one of the German pistols. And the 47 Armored Infantry guys was guarding them. And he was so mad that they shot those boys up like they did. This guy, he goes, blood, blood, blood. And then the 4 guys. And Captain Jones said, we'll have to move on up and join up and see what our order will be. So we moved on up, and that's one of the battles that comes into my mind every once in a while. Go back, carrying fire and taking bait. That's what we did. We went in the woods and cut stuff. We didn't cut nothing along the road because the Germans are smart enough to know there's something cut there. There's a problem. So what we did, we pulled back and camouflage, and when they Germans got all the way up in there, we come out on both sides. And boy, them Germans didn't know to go blind. They threw their weapons away, put their hands up. And one of the 47 Armored Infantry guys wanted to be a hot shot. And he pulled a flash out of his pocket and took a drink. And one of these boys up on one of the trucks, they was malnutrition, pale and thin, And this one boy says, "You mind if I have a little drink of that too?" And the guy, 47 years, the guy says, "Sure, help yourself." So he took a swallow of that, and he went right down because he was undernourished and thin and pale. And he says, "Are you guys Germans?" And the 47-year-old said, "H, no, we're not Germans, we're Americans. Can't you tell them we're Americans?" And boy, that went down all over those 4 trucks. And he was saying, "We're saved, we're going home, we're saved." And then Colonel Cole come over and he says, "Boys, you're going to go home, but you're going to go to a medical hospital in the States until you're well enough to go home." And that's another.
One story that I like also is that one time he was having to go from his vehicle to go to get 10-in-1 rations to fill his vehicle back up because he was responsible as the driver for his radio man, his gunner, and the officer that he drove to also make sure that they had enough food until they were going to get to their next location where they could resupply. And he had to walk from the command car over to an area that was staged and had it, and then he heard some noise behind him coming up over the trees.
That's it. And then 109, Mr. Smith, come over the treetops and he opened up fire and bullets were going up past on both sides. Now, it wasn't after me. He was after that truck that had 305 gallons of gas. And the bullets went up. I had a letter of prayer on me that my mother gave me. And I still have it yet. And I made out 3 dozen so far. I'm passing them up there at the Moose Club that I joined. And out in the different places I know people, in the grocery stores I know, I give them a letter of prayer. Now, to give out over 3 dozen of them.
You've given out a lot more than that. You lost count. Because it's in your first book, and you've sold a lot of books. A lot of people have it now. I have one here.
Yeah.
Mr. Libby, in his faith in Christ and also the love of his mother, she gave him this letter that was also carried by his Uncle Lyman in World War I. There are a variety of these. Some people have said that they had this letter. Charles, the curator at the Fort Indian Town Gap Museum, sent me some that dated back to the 1700s that were very similar to this.
Yeah.
It's also provided in the book. But the letter that he carried, and he attributes to his survival and making it back here, was his faith in God. In this letter that says, "In the name of God, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, as Christ stopped at the Mount of Olives, all guns shall stop whoever carries this letter with him." And it goes on and talks about how it was written in gold letters and sent down here, and it puts all his faith in the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And that's one particular time that he was saved, because show him how close those bullets were to you and where the dust was kicking up. When he tells me the story, he goes just like this. Enough for his body to walk in.
Yeah, because they had tripwire, landmines, and what they call a bouncing Betty. A bouncing Betty had a ball bearing in it like that. And they didn't go up like that, they went out like that. And it raised H on the infantry. And lots of times you had to bury also on a tripwire. Now, a tripwire was with black thread. They'd have it tied down, and if your foot hacked and kicked it, there you go. That's another one of their tricks.
One of the things that he's very proud of is he was put on a mission by Captain Jones because he had seen an officer that had a radio that was picking up transmissions from somewhere, and it was playing American music. Captain Jones enjoyed music, and he wanted for Sergeant Libby and for Peterman, his radio guy, to go to a location where the Germans had abandoned a bunch of gear and so forth, to go and try to find this radio so that he could have one and pick the transmission. So tell him about that trip.
That was up at the Elk River. And Captain Jones says, "Libby, you and Peterman see if you can find one of those radios," because the 47th Armored Infantry, they had one that was playing American music. So when Peterman and I got up there, we tried to find one and we couldn't find the radio. So we tried to pull a generator up over the dike and we couldn't even move it. About that time, I said, come on, because a sniper had hit one of our boys in the stomach. And boy, they just riddled that tree. There wasn't no leaves on the tree anymore. But he finally come down when he wasn't walking. And another thing, after that happened, I said, come on, Peter, let's get the H out of here. Things are starting to get hot. So as we were going back to where my vehicle was, a German came out of the barn, and he was standing on the dike on the slope. I reached for my pistol, and he said, they're shooting. I said, what's the marking? He said, I got 5 buddies underneath the hay. They want to surrender to the Americans. They don't want to surrender to the Russians. And Pete, when we first seen him, Pete said, what are we going to do, Charlie? Shoot him? I said, no, we're not going to shoot him. I said, Hitler's dead. I said, we'll take him back. So when we got back with these 6 Germans on there, well, I told them, I asked this one German, what's his load? He said, I got 5 buddies hiding underneath the hay. They don't want to surrender to the Russians. So I said, you take and tell them, come out. So when they come out, I says, Hagger die Heizhofen. That means get your hands up in the air. And while they were getting ready to go, I says, I'm going to put you up on that vehicle, that disarming car that I had. I said, but the first one that makes the wrong move, I said, he's going to blow all your heads off. And they said, yeah, just for shade, that's Nick. And we're going to do something like that. So when I get back to Camp Johnny, he was like Clint Eastwood. He had half a grin in his face. He said, where in the East did you get that guy? He's worse than radio, I said, yeah. I said, we couldn't find the radio, we found these guys. He said, we'll take them on down the road. And so we took them down the road, and that whole field all the way around was full of German prisoners. Because Hitler was dead, and the band, the German army was breaking up fast. And I says, there's your hotel, and I says, there's all your buddies. I said, now get the H down off my vehicle. So when they get down, every German pat me a little on the shoulder. Then the last German got down, he pat me on the shoulder. He says, du bist a good Soldaten. I said, ja, ich verstehe. He said, you sprechen the Dutch? And when they walked over, they looked back and they went, they was glad that I didn't kill him.
Awarded the European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 4 Bronze Stars, Good Conduct Medal, Honorable Service Medal, Victory Medal, World War II, Army of Occupation, World War II Medal, American Defense Service Medal, American Campaign Medal, and the Submachine Gun Badge. 100 years of stories and service for most of his life, and he continues his ministry in passing the letter of protection or the letter of prayer to people, sharing his stories, sharing history, giving a different perspective, not the on this date they were here and this is how many tanks they were. It's the personal things that one of the soldiers felt and saw and was able to come here and share with you. And it's a rare thing to be able to witness that. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all that you do to preserve the history of World War II. It's been a pleasure to be here. And one more big hand for Sergeant Charles Gray.
As usual, we'll have some questions to answer, but first of all, we have something very important for you. No one goes out of here empty-handed, and what we do have is something that nobody gets except for presenters to us. The highly coveted, very valuable Central Pennsylvania World War II Roundtable mug,
Very
which
cool.
which will hold more than water, by the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very appreciative.
And
I'll fill it when I get out of here. Holding for me.
I'm going to promote you to general. I'm going to give you a star. Star from the United States flag.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Good. We have a little time left for some questions and answers. I'm sure there were a few. Will you take some questions and answers?
Yes.
All right. We have one right here. Terry?
How big was the gun you had on your half track compared to the gun in the typical German tank?
So, on his command car was a 50 caliber.
50 caliber.
50 caliber.
50
was on the
caliber.
command car. 360-degree motion on the turn.
Does that answer your question, Terry?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there was one time, well, excuse me, but there was one time that an airplane was flying over, and we called him Bed Tech Charlie, and he'd be flying real slow. I don't know how they flew him. It was so slow. And I just, but I decided I better not, because a lot of good court martial.
Sergeant, how many years were you in the CCC?
CCC, you were there,
What?
and you went 2.5 years at the CCC camp?
Yeah.
About 2.5 years.
2.5 years, and we had the 36th flood in Williamsport, and we had 8 feet of water in my house, in my father's house. And he called my captain, Captain Jack Thompson. He said, well, my father had called, and I don't know how he got to get a hold of Captain Jack Thompson, but he said, I would like to have my son home. I need help for taking out the debris. My other brother was out in California picking grapes, picking oranges and grapefruit, having a good time, and I'm almost stepped on the hot wire. But I put up.
Sergeant, did you find your CCC training to be helpful in your transition to the military?
Did you, your CCC,
No.
your CCC stuff, you found that it helped you to transition to being in the military, helped you, right?
Yeah.
The discipline that was in there and the presence of the officers that were there, he really liked that way of life, and he adjusted very well. He says, I liked it. And so it was. And I've talked to a lot of other people that were either in the camp or relatives were, and they had the same conclusion, that it really was a valuable stepping stone to help in the war effort. Does anybody think CCC camp should still be around? I do.
Yes, I have a question. On such a cold, wintry night like tonight, I was wondering if you could tell us about your experience in the Battle of the Bulge, 1944-45. This kind of cold weather you guys went through back then, the Bulge. Battle of the Bulge.
Tell me about the cold and what was going on, how cold it was there.
Yeah. Well, in the Battle of the Bulge, we had 10 below zero, and we really didn't know what to do. But there was one GDI guy had a crazy notion. He opened up the hood and squirt the fire extinguishers on the distributor. Then he went in and see if it would start off, and it kicked right off. That's how we knew that you could use a fire extinguisher to cool off your distributor enough that it would kick on.
Tell them about some of the guys that had to be carried out because of the frostbite on their feet.
Well, there was a lot of guys walking that had their feet wrapped with torn blankets on them, and that's where they had to get around. And usually there was, the medics would come around, and some of the guys would be dropping out of rank because of the they couldn't take no more. And we always helped out to get these boys that couldn't no more long ago. And of course, we knew that spring was coming, and we'd make sure that they got taken care of. There's things that you do when you really think you can help your brother friend, and not the guy that's trying to get in and has the black flag. One of these days, we're going to have to hit him. And when we hit them, we better hit them hard, because it's either going to be them or us.
There's not really need questions.
Yeah. Paralyzed can't take much.
It's all that dancing he did yesterday. That's what it is.
Sergeant Libby, can you tell us a little bit about what you did after the war?
After the war. Tell them what you did after the war.
Well, I just worked in another, I worked in Bethlehem Steel up in Williamsport, and I really had a good job. And then I got, my brother wanted me to come down to where is Duncannon, and then I went over to the,
Then he came back and he had a garbage route that he bought off of somebody, and that was a very lucrative business, and he enjoyed it very much, and he did that for several years, and then he started a family, and he has 3 children, and after that, and he lost one at infancy.
my first one.
And then he did that, and then he owned a restaurant called the Racks Restaurant in Williamsport. And then after that, he kind of retired and just spent all his time on the dance floor. Until he met me, and I did this stuff with him, and now I take him all over to share his stories.
Yeah, Thursday I danced with 6 different women.
We are going to be at the Reading Air Show this summer, and we'll be there for the entire time. And the highlight is we hear there's a swing band. He's bringing his dancing shoes.
I got to tell you,
Hold on, we got a question right over here.
Well, thank you very much for your service. You listed a long list of battles that you fought in, and you probably saw a lot of acts of heroism and humanity, and I was wondering if there was one in particular that stuck out to you.
You didn't hear the question? Okay. He was asking if there was one in particular act of heroism, something that was really great that you saw another soldier do in one of the battles that sticks in your mind. Jim?
well, most of the time when you've heard or seen, one brother was helping another brother, and it was just like brothers, and they helped each other.
Tell him about Jim Lubender and his action.
The what?
Sergeant Jim Lubender. Tell him about him.
Jim Lubender, you probably heard a lot about Audie Murphy. He was a good soldier, and he did a lot for it. And Jim Lubender was one of my best friends. And he got on his blow-out vehicle, one of ours, and it had a 50 caliber on it, and he started to mow down the Germans. And he got a piece of shrapnel in his back, and I lost him. He was a great friend of mine.
That he managed to take out a lot and to do a lot of damage with
the Germans was counterattacked. The Germans were counterattacking, and he was just like Audie Murphy. He was up there, just these Germans were coming at him. He was just mowing them down, and finally one of them got him because a piece of our shrapnel went through his back.
We honored him in the new book. There's a picture and there's a story about him in there.
You got to be brothers, you know. They're good friends you had. But we had shows. Tell us about.
Oh, we're going to finish questions. This is called Q&A. Question and answer.
They ask the question, and you give the right answer.
Yeah, tell him what you're going to
Hold on, don't you leave. Don't you leave.
That's what he wants to say.
We spoke a little bit before the meeting,
Yes.
but 40 years after World War II, I had the pleasure and honor of knowing your wartime battalion commander. At that World War II, Lieutenant Colonel Gallagher, and I knew him as General Gallagher. Great hard-fighting and lovable Irishman. Can you tell me maybe one or two reminiscences of Lieutenant Colonel Gallagher?
He wants you to tell him a little bit about Lieutenant Colonel Gallagher. Tell him about how nice a guy he was and so forth.
Well, General Gallagher, he ended up being a general, and he was one of the nicest officers I've ever met. And I didn't even know he had said it, but I finally found out he did say it. And he lost his life, and he was buried at their
Indian Town Gap.
Indian Town Gap. And we was out there here a couple of months ago, and I laid a small bouquet on his grave. He was one of the nicest men. He told my wife, when we was going to the hospitality room, we was on the elevator going up to the hospitality room, and he says to my wife, he says, Mrs. Libby, he says, you got one of the nicest men I know. He says he's a gentleman too. That made me feel kind of good.
We did find his grave, and we did have a nice ceremony. He wasn't able to meet at the funeral of his commanding officer. I had found out later that he had passed, so it took a little while for us to find it, but we found his grave, and we took him over, and we had a real nice tribute and ceremony to Gallagher. There's also mentioned in the new.
There's one more I just really got to tell you. When I was in the CC camp, Captain Jack come to us in the kitchen. He says, fellas, there's a girl down in Bloomsburg Hospital going to die if somebody don't give her a transfusion. So there was 27 of us went down, and out of the 27, there was 3 of us that had AB positive. And they took our test, and then we went out into the outside. It was in May. We were waiting for the reporter from what our blood type was. So after a little bit, a nurse came at the door and said, we're taking you first. So I went up, and when I seen that girl, I thought she was dead. She was white as a ghost and cell. I thought I could never help that girl. And so I give her a blood transfusion. Dr. Snyder says, give this boy a shot, 2 shots of whiskey. I'm only 17 years old. He said, give him 2 shots of whiskey and send him down the kitchen to eat a cheese sandwich and drink a quart of milk. And while I was down there, this girl's father come down and he was crying in the kitchen. And he says, Charlie, he says, if I had $1 million, he says, I would share it with you. He says, my daughter wants to see you. I said, huh? He says, my daughter wants to see you. She wants to see you before you go back. Well, when I got up there, I looked at her and she smiled. She was saying, thank you. And later on in life, I was in the Pelican up near
Brass Pelican,
near Benton, Pennsylvania. And her daughters come out. They never see me. They had come out, but it was a little late because we were talking about a swimming pool that the tree was that big in the center of it. After the camp broke up, and the 2 girls was walking and looking at me and walking, and they knew, you're supposed to ask him. You're supposed to ask him. And I waited till they got so close to me, and I went, that's him. So later on in life, one of the girls I was dancing with over at the Moose in Williamsport, these girls asked if we knew Charles, and they didn't know my last name. They kept saying, "Don't you know Charles?" And the girl says, "You must be Charlie Libby." They said, "That's right, that's him." So that's how we're come about down in
And the neat part of it is that the daughters of this girl that he saved her life came over and hugged him and looked at Mr. Libby and said, "We have a little bit of you in us." There's a question there.
Sergeant, you mentioned near the end of the war you were up near the Elbe River. Did you run into any Russians?
But they want to know if you ran into the Russians near the Elbe River.
Yeah, we ran into them, and they wouldn't do a dance for us like they did in a movie. I didn't care for it, and the guys in the movie didn't care for it.
We did do a story from the command car. It is in there. I'll just quickly give you a little piece of it. They were on one side, they were on the other. One night, some of the American GIs, they had a little boat. They wanted to go over and just talk to them and try to trade some things because they wanted some Russian vodka. On the way over in the boat, the Russians shot at us. They turned around and came back. The next day, the Russians started to come over. When we shot, we didn't miss. Russian officer came over and started talking and speaking in Russian, and he was all mad and this and that. And the American officer, whoever was at the unit at that time, was pacing back and forth. And this Russian didn't know that he was a linguist and spoke Russian. And then he finally looked at this officer and told him, he said, "Those are the wages of war." And they went back to the other side, and no one ever came back over and did anything again. But yeah, good question. Yeah, they did meet up with him. They weren't very fond of him. And the Germans were every German that they took as a prisoner, they wanted to surrender to the Americans. They did not want to be taken by the Russians. All right, next question. Good.
I'll be home tomorrow.
Thank you for your service. 3 years ago, I retraced my father's steps through the Battle of the Bulge and did the Dead Man's Bridge Walk in Belgium. And I was and visited Peace Woods, where when every American who served in World War II comes back, they plant a birch tree. I don't know if you've ever been back to Europe or been able to visit. Over there, it's amazing because even me, people hugged me because of my father. They in Belgium, they said, "Our country is your country because more blood has been shed by your fathers than any amount that we have." And thank you so much.
He has not been back, and I'm trying to talk him into and getting a couple of plane tickets and doing it. But every time he reaches in his pocket, all he pulls out is lint.
Well, the group that I'm with, we send 2 veterans every year. 2 World War II veterans.
Do you send one bodyguard?
Yes.
Okay.
And
We'll
we
talk.
have a trip scheduled for March 24th, and we're sending 2.
Fantastic. Oh, yeah. Do you want to go back and retrace your steps in Germany and Belgium and all the places you work? Would you like to go do that? There's some places to dance.
Yeah.
Okay.
I went with a girl after the war.
Wait, let's finish the question. You can tell about girls out there.
Anybody else?
Just a reminder where we're at.
A lot of these folks might not be familiar with the M20 command car, with a 6-wheel armored car, very lightly armored, very easily destroyed, very easily damaged because it's very lightly armored. It looked very similar to the M8 Greyhound armored car, which had the 37mm gun and a rotating turret. The M20 did not have a turret. All that it had was an open crew compartment with a 50 caliber machine gun. I'm pretty familiar with that vehicle myself because my uncle was killed in one of those.
You were a driver, and I know those M20 seats were like horrible. You literally sat pretty much right on the floor. So how many hours could you sit and drive one of those vehicles, sitting basically on the floor with your legs stretched out and trying to stick your neck up so you could see what was going on?
They're just wanting to know about how many hours at a time you had to sit while you were driving that command car because it was an uncomfortable vehicle to drive.
Oh, you had to be prepared to go anytime. And there was one time that my vehicle was acting up, and they don't try to find a motor; they just pull it out and put another one in. Well, I was down at where they did the work, and there was one time that I was watching. They said I'd be there about 3 days. So lots of times I wouldn't have nothing to do in those 3 days. So I thought I'd come to get my stuff all ready to go home or go back to camp. And while I was in there, there was a great big fireplace, beautiful big fireplace. I thought, I wonder if I could see the blue sky. So I looked up there. There's 3 hams and 2 slabs of bacon hanging out there. Of course, I was real nice. I only took 1 slab.
To answer your question, though, in my conversations with Mr. Libby, he was C Company, and Charlie Company was the one that rotated the most. When someone would come off, they'd send them in. He said at times it seemed as if they forgot in the rotation that they were to get a break. And he was in that vehicle. And another thing that he constantly reminded me of was that because he was the driver and because he was in charge of that officer, he was responsible for that vehicle to be able to get that officer wherever he needed to be at any time. There were many times where he did not get off the vehicle. So he was in that uncomfortable position. And being in the parade this last year in that vehicle, I thought that same thing, brother, when I was there. When I was watching that guy drive it, I thought to myself, wow, you have to almost be a contortionist to be comfortable in something like that. You hear about the ace pilots shooting down all the planes, and you hear about Audie Murphy, and you hear about all these guys, but you never think about the people that really struggled and were in charge of those officers to make sure they got from point A to point B. And it is remarkable, and that is a good point to bring up. Very uncomfortable, long hours in that position. And sometimes at night, only the cat eyes on there and having to steer by moonlight because it was lights out. You had that as well. Were there any other questions? Oh, over here's one.
Either scream or wait a second.
Thank you for your service, sir. What was it like, the towns that you took and all that? What were the civilians like after you took the towns?
Tell them how the civilians were, how they treated you.
Sure.
Any of the civilians, how they were.
Well, while I was in there and going through all these battles, I got to meet a lot of German people, and they really thought a lot of us because they was afraid to say anything. If they wouldn't say hi Hitler, they get shot. And where we was at, the German people was really good to us, and we was getting potatoes out of their bin down in the cellar. They said we could have any as much as we'd like to help ourselves. But we had a great big pile of potatoes there, and pretty soon they got down to 1 bottle of vodka. And after a bit, the potato was over there, ended up over here. They got 6 bottles of cognac out of the potatoes.
They treated him well, and he was very fond of the German citizens and the Belgians and all the people that he met, and made friendships and a few romances along the way as well, and even had marriage proposals from wealthy German female business owners and so forth while he was there. So maybe on that trip, if I give you the name, we can see if we can find an old flame. Those I kept to myself.
Vilna Brausman. She cooked and didn't want me to come home. She says, Charlie, says, you handsome. She says, I'd love to have a baby from you.
On that note, everybody, thank you so much. Don't forget the helmet committee, we'll see you February 1st.
We're gonna, next month. Next month, so next month the people are on here the 20th. Okay, that's what you're lucky.